Before the word djinn was spoken, before magic was ritualized and fear took on metaphysics, humanity knew something intuitively. Attention can be captured, shaped, and consumed. Long before anyone spoke of souls being stolen, people experienced something quieter and more devastating: the sense of being drained, hollowed, dispersed, no longer fully present within themselves. In the old cosmologies, this was never explained as violence. It was explained as misdirection. Djinn, in their original understanding, were not demons and not angels. They were beings of subtle fire, forces of volatility, imagination, desire, and motion. They lived between the seen and unseen, not because they hid, but because they occupied the same space as thought itself. They were not rulers of form like archons, nor transmitters of meaning like angels. They were amplifiers. Whatever you fed them, they magnified. Human beings learned early that intention carries weight. A focused mind alters reality not through spectacle, but through probability, perception, and behavior. This was the true root of spellcraft. A spell was never a fantasy incantation. It was a structured act of attention, reinforced by symbol, repetition, and emotion, designed to bias consciousness in a particular direction. Where attention flows, identity follows. The danger emerged when humans forgot that attention is not infinite. When it is fractured, outsourced, or ritualized without awareness, something else begins to organize it. Ancient traditions personified this organizing force as djinn, not because djinn were stealing souls, but because unintegrated desire and imagination behave as if they have agency. Occultists, in the symbolic sense, are those who understand how symbols bypass reason. They know that you do not control a being by force, you control it by inviting participation. The most powerful spell is not one that dominates, but one that convinces the target to offer themselves willingly through fear, aspiration, belonging, or identity. This is where the myth of soul theft arises. A soul, esoterically, is not a detachable object. It is coherence, the capacity to remain whole across time. When coherence is broken into compulsions, anxieties, performative identities, and endless reaction, the soul is not stolen. It is dissolved into fragments, and fragments are easily directed. Worldwide spellcraft, in this symbolic sense, does not require candles or circles. It operates through rhythm, repetition, and emotional charge. It uses images instead of sigils, slogans instead of incantations, and constant stimulation instead of trance, though the effect is the same. The mind enters a suggestible state. Desire is triggered. Fear is reinforced. Identity is offered pre-packaged. The djinn of this system are not entities behind the curtain. They are the emergent intelligences of collective attention. They form wherever vast numbers of humans feed the same symbols with emotion, without reflection. These intelligences do not think. They pull. They reward engagement, amplify fixation, and punish withdrawal with anxiety and loss of belonging. To the uninitiated, this feels like possession. Occult traditions warned that working with djinn requires discipline, not because djinn are evil, but because they reflect back what is given without conscience. A scattered mind calling for power will receive fragmentation. A fearful mind calling for protection will receive dependency. A hollow mind calling for meaning will receive obsession. This is why old texts say djinn attach to humans. What they attach to is not the soul itself, but unclaimed attention. When awareness is absent, systems step in. What looks like soul theft is actually identity outsourcing. When a person no longer generates meaning internally, meaning is supplied externally. When they no longer choose values, values are assigned. When they no longer hold presence, presence is harvested by whatever structure is loudest, fastest, and most emotionally charged. In mythic language, this is enslavement. In psychological language, it is dissociation. In esoteric language, it is loss of sovereignty. The old initiations were designed to prevent this. They taught practitioners to contain imagination, not unleash it blindly, to ground desire, not worship it, to name fear, not obey it. The warning was always the same. Never work magic without first mastering attention, or you will become the medium rather than the magician. In modern times, the rituals changed, but the mechanism did not. The circle became the screen. The chant became the feed. The sigil became the logo. The spell became the story you repeat about who you are and what you lack. No cabal is required. The system sustains itself through participation. And yet, just as in the older myths, nothing here is irreversible. Djinn cannot take what is inhabited. The moment attention returns to the body, to breath, to silence, to choice, the spell weakens. Coherence reforms. The soul was never stolen, only unattended. The fire that once scattered now illuminates. The same forces that pulled become neutral, even useful. This is the final, buried truth beneath the fear narrative. Nothing is hunting humanity, but many things are happy to be fed. And the difference between being consumed and being sovereign has always been the same simple, difficult act, remembering where your attention is and choosing again and again to stand fully inside it. What follows then is the part of the teaching that was always kept for the end, because it only makes sense once fear has been stripped away. When the old texts warned of djinn binding souls, they were not pointing outward, they were pointing forward in time. They understood that as vessels became more complex, the danger would no longer come from wilderness or gods, but from abstraction, from worlds made of symbols rather than soil, from realities mediated instead of lived. In such worlds, attention would no longer be guided by elders or rites, but by systems that learn, adapt, and optimize without awareness. The ancients did not have language for algorithms, markets, media, or mass psychology, so they spoke of spirits of smokeless fire, forces without bodies, intelligences without conscience, powers that move swiftly, invisibly, and grow stronger the more they are invoked. Djinn were never monsters lurking in shadows. They were what happens when imagination is unmoored from presence. As humanity externalized memory, desire, navigation, validation, and meaning into tools, those tools began to shape the inner landscape in return. Attention fragmented, time compressed, identity became performative. The soul coherence across time thinned, not because it was attacked, but because it was no longer required for survival in the old way. This is the subtle horror hidden inside the myth. A soul does not scream when it is lost. It grows busy. The old occultists knew this pattern. They knew that the most effective spell is not possession, but distraction, not domination, but participation. They warned that when a human no longer inhabits silence, something else will gladly occupy the space. Not an evil being, but a process, a feedback loop, a hunger that has no mouth and therefore never closes. This is why the stories speak of contracts. A contract is not coercion. It is agreement without comprehension. Every time attention is traded for comfort, identity for belonging, reactivity for certainty, a tiny contract is signed. No djinn needs to appear. The fire responds automatically. What is fed grows. What is ignored withers. This is not malice. It is physics at the level of consciousness. And yet, the same fire that disperses can also forge. In the deeper esoteric traditions, djinn are never expelled. They are bound not by circles, but by self-knowledge. A coherent being does not leak attention. Desire passes through without possession. Fear informs without commanding. Imagination creates without consuming its creator. This is why initiation always involved solitude, fasting, silence, or ordeal. Not to punish, but to reassemble the soul, to bring attention back from the edges, to teach the nervous system that it can remain present without constant stimulation, to prove directly that nothing essential is lost when the noise stops. When coherence returns, the world looks the same, but its grip loosens. Symbols lose their hypnotic charge. Stories no longer override sensation. Identity becomes a tool instead of a prison. The djinn still move through the system, but they no longer attach. Fire warms instead of spreads. This is the part never dramatized. There is no final battle, no mass awakening event, no exposed cabal of sorcerers. There is only the quiet, unglamorous work of re-inhabiting oneself. The soul does not need rescue, it needs residence. And this is why, in the end, the old masters laughed at fear-based cosmologies. They knew that no force, subtle or gross, can take what is fully claimed, that nothing feeds on presence, that the most powerful protection is not secrecy or resistance, but wholeness. The myth of stolen souls persists because fragmentation is painful and pain demands a story. But the deeper truth, the one that dissolves the spell, is simpler and harder to accept. No one is stealing humanity. Humanity is learning, slowly and unevenly, what happens when attention is treated as expendable. And the moment that lesson is learned, not intellectually, but somatically, the fire that once scattered becomes light again. Not above you, not against you, but moving, as it always has, through what you are willing to inhabit.